This story still haunts me, as it unfolded just last week. My extended family is anything but ordinary. I'll spare you the intricate details, but suffice it to say, nearly everyone is either obsessed with firearms, an avid outdoorsman, or both. It's not your typical family dynamic, and it leads to some rather unconventional traditions. While most families plan relaxing summer vacations, ours gathers in the dead of winter, braving the cold for what we consider fun. And forget about tropical getaways or bustling cities. We always rent a house tucked away in some remote location, usually in the middle of dense woods. This year, the venue was a sprawling cabin nestled in the mountains of Maine. Though calling it a cabin feels like an understatement. It was a luxurious, almost mansion-like structure, designed to accommodate our unusually large family of hunters, marksmen, and outdoors enthusiasts. Here's where things take a turn for the strange. Our family has a tradition of engaging in peculiar games, most of which revolve around some form of shooting or tactical competition. The crown jewel of these activities is a massive game of laser tag, held annually on the second-to-last night of our stay. The stakes are surprisingly high. The winner takes home a hefty cash pot and, perhaps more importantly, earns a year's worth of unmatched bragging rights. The equipment we use isn't your run-of-the-mill toy store set. It's industrial-grade gear, meticulously designed and custom-built by my Uncle Darius. He takes this event so seriously that you'd think it was the Olympics of laser tag. This year held a special significance for me, as I had just turned 18 and was finally allowed to participate. I wasn't in it for the money, though. My excitement stemmed purely from the thrill of finally joining this long-standing tradition I had watched from the sidelines for years. Before we ventured into the forest, Uncle Darius gathered everyone for a quick but thorough briefing. He explained how to operate the equipment, emphasizing safety and fairness. After ensuring we all understood the rules, he instructed us to set a 10-minute timer on our phones and prepare to scatter. Without any further warning, Darius shot off into the woods like a seasoned sprinter, vanishing into the shadows. The rest of the family followed suit in a chaotic frenzy, splitting off in different directions and quickly disappearing into the darkness. Most of them seemed to head uphill, so I decided to take a different approach. I ventured downhill, reasoning that fewer people would choose that path, giving me a better shot at outlasting the competition. The snow blanketing the ground provided just enough visibility to navigate the dense trees, its pristine surface shimmering faintly under the moonlight. Each crunch of my boots seemed deafening in the stillness, and I felt a growing unease despite the supposed safety of the game. I eventually found a secluded spot, a small rise overlooking the hillside, where I could pause and catch my breath. It was an ideal vantage point. From here, I could see a good stretch of the slope and plan my next move. For a few moments, I simply listened, hoping to catch any sound of movement nearby. The forest was eerily silent, save for the occasional whisper of wind through the branches. Deciding to take the initiative, I began moving laterally along the slope, weaving through the trees to avoid leaving an obvious trail. My goal was to flank anyone who might be hiding above me, but the dense foliage and uneven terrain made progress slow. I walked for what felt like 15 minutes, deliberately putting as much distance as possible between myself and the house. Time wasn't a pressing concern. It was still early, and the midnight deadline seemed comfortably far off. Yet with every step, an unsettling sensation began to creep over me, a feeling that I wasn't alone. As I started climbing back up the hill, a faint crunching sound broke the silence, snapping my attention to the woods opposite the house. My breath hitched as I ducked behind the nearest tree, my heart hammering in my chest. I squinted into the dim light, trying to pinpoint the source of the noise. At first there was nothing, just an expanse of shadows and snow. Then I saw them, a faint trail of footprints barely visible in the snow, leading to a thick tree about 15 yards behind me. Someone was there, standing perfectly still, concealed by the tree's bulk. The realization sent a chill down my spine. Why hadn't they tagged me yet? I was completely exposed, an easy target. It didn't make sense unless they were toying with me. A surge of adrenaline hit me, and I bolted uphill, my boots slipping on the icy ground as I scrambled to put as much distance as possible between me and the lurking figure. My mind raced with possibilities. Were they simply waiting for a better shot, or was something else going on? As I reached a small clearing, another detail stopped me cold. Further to my left, a second set of footprints emerged, cutting through the snow from deeper within the forest. These tracks weren't fresh, but were deliberate, looping toward me and then veering back into the darkness. My stomach churned. Whoever left those tracks had been following me from even farther away, staying just out of sight. Was it the same person, or were there more of them? Before I could make sense of it, a loud thud echoed from the slope I had just climbed. It sounded unmistakably like a body hitting the snow. My breath caught, and I instinctively turned, scanning the area for any sign of movement. The stillness was unnerving. Whatever had caused the noise was now hidden, watching. Panic surged, and I broke into a sprint, heading back toward the house as fast as my legs could carry me. My mind screamed at me to keep moving, but dread clawed at my thoughts. The feeling of being hunted was almost unbearable. As I ran, something new caught my eye, a faint glimmer ahead in the distance. At first I thought it was the lights of the house, but as I drew closer, the glow resolved into something stranger. A lantern, swaying gently in the wind, hanging from a branch. It hadn't been there before. I slowed, my instincts screaming at me to turn back, but my curiosity got the better of me. Just as I was about to reach for it, a sudden rustling erupted behind me, followed by a guttural voice that sent shivers down my spine. "Not so fast." I didn't look back. I couldn't. Terror propelled me forward, my legs burning as I sprinted through the snow. The house lights finally came into view, distant but unmistakable. Behind me I could hear the sound of pursuit. Heavy footsteps, more than one set, closing in. My lungs screamed for air as I pushed myself harder, the lantern and its strange presence fading from my thoughts. Reaching the clearing, I saw figures ahead, my family, and with them, safety. But even as relief washed over me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was still out there, watching from the shadows. The snow blanketing the ground cast an eerie, otherworldly glow. It was just bright enough to weave my way cautiously through the dense skeletal trees, yet dim enough to let the shadows dance and flicker in unsettling patterns. Each step felt deliberate, the crunch of snow underfoot mingling with the soft whistle of wind threading through the branches above. I had chosen a secluded perch, a small rise that offered a clear view of the hillside, a vantage point I hoped would give me a strategic edge. From here, I could catch my breath and think, heart hammering in my chest like a war drum. My plan was simple but risky, to bide my time and wait for the perfect opportunity. Then I'd move laterally along the slope, gradually working my way upward to outflank anyone who might already be lying in wait. The forest was unnervingly quiet, every sound around me magnified as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. The faint rustle of branches overhead mimicked whispers, and each distant crunch of snow felt like it could belong to a hunter's footstep. As I crouched in my makeshift hiding spot, the weight of isolation pressed against me. Every slight movement from the shadows played tricks on my mind, transforming harmless shapes into potential threats. My grip tightened instinctively around the laser gun in my hands. Each passing second seemed to stretch into an eternity, the eerie silence only broken by the occasional snap of a twig or the hollow echo of wind brushing against the forest floor. My nerves were stretched thin, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't truly alone. After what seemed like forever, but was likely only a few minutes, I decided to act. Hugging the slope, I began walking parallel to it, my steps deliberate and careful. My boots sank slightly into the snow, muffling my movements as I pushed further from the house. The cold air stung my cheeks, but the adrenaline kept me warm. I must have walked for at least 15 minutes, weaving through the trees and trying to put as much distance as possible between myself and any potential pursuers. Time was on my side. Midnight was still hours away. Then, as I started to ascend the slope again, a sound shattered the silence, a faint crunching noise coming from my left. My pulse quickened as I instinctively dropped behind a nearby tree, clutching my laser marker like it was a lifeline. The sound had come from deeper in the forest, the direction opposite the house. Peeking around the trunk, I strained my eyes to see through the dim light. At first, there was nothing but the skeletal outlines of trees and the undisturbed snow. Then I saw it, a faint trail of footprints, so subtle they were nearly swallowed by the shadows. They led to a thick tree about 15 yards behind me. Someone was there, watching, waiting. A cold dread washed over me as a disturbing realization crept in. If they were close enough to stalk me, why hadn't they already tagged me? I was in plain sight, completely oblivious until that moment. This wasn't just a game anymore. It felt deliberate, malicious. My breathing quickened, fogging the air around me. I knew I couldn't stay there. Whoever was lurking had the advantage. I had to move. I bolted uphill, my boots slipping slightly on the icy snow as I propelled myself forward. My breath came in quick, sharp gasps, the cold biting harder now. As I ran, I caught sight of another set of footprints, this time cutting in from deeper within the woods. These tracks were strange. They didn't follow the natural curve of the terrain, but instead looped erratically, almost as if their maker had been circling me. My heart pounded harder, the implications sinking in. Someone had been trailing me all along, staying far enough back to remain undetected. How long had they been there? And why? Before I could dwell on it, a loud, distinct thud echoed behind me. It sounded like someone falling hard into the snow. I froze mid-step, the primal urge to look warring with my instinct to keep running. Finally, I glanced back but saw nothing except the trees and the faintly illuminated snow. The silence that followed was oppressive, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. My gut screamed at me to move, and I obeyed, sprinting towards the house as fast as my legs could carry me. By now, my sense of direction was fading, replaced by a single, desperate focus, getting back to safety. Each step felt heavier, the snow dragging at my boots, the cold biting deeper into my skin. I checked my phone briefly. It was past 11. An hour had vanished without me realizing it. Fear was a clock, and it was ticking fast. The house was still a distant glimmer in my mind's eye, a beacon of safety I wasn't sure I could reach in time. Have you ever found yourself in a moment where the line between a game and something more sinister blurs? Where your instincts scream louder than your logic? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in my situation? And if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more chilling tales like this one. Your support keeps the adventure alive.